Hello everyone and welcome. We are here to, as the video title said, how to burst as a god without sucking. The major thing here is if you turn god, either it's on your own accord or through a mechanic or whatever, you will have always the problem on your mind that you need to burst at some point. And I see people just march through every stuff they want to do and don't care what they do actually, which then results in pretty fucked up and bad, bad, bad bursts. Why do I want you people to be aware of how stuff goes? Well, the first thing is transforming into a god does a lot of stuff to you. Everything that you have in your halls or in your aspect forms that affects gods, whatever, gets pulled into you. For example, my might got raised by not exactly half of it, but a bit more, and means now that my bolt staff does way more. Like I had, for example, in another video's abilities from Necromancer. If I'm throwing a skull now, I do 900k damage instead of 500, which means I'm not totally doubling my damage, but I have nearly doubled my damage. And this gets further enhanced by every staff. A god deals more damage to that, a god deals more damage there, and whatnot. Which in return means that a god deals a decent amount of damage. Well, the thing is now, many people are just going in as god or bursting without proper accounting for many things. First thing is, if you're doing it in a raid situation, you will have hopefully support to have your back. To help them have your back, you have to count in buffs like in the previous video told, to take account of your own rotations and so on. So you can perfect whatever you put out. But here comes something that is utterly important too. The gods themselves have different ways to set up their own bursts, for example, and this varies from class to class, and it varies from the field that you are playing against. I will now show you a burst on this boss. I will do the burst now on the Revenant because it's not the highest damage class, but it's great for showing something because it also works here. An example of a burst that isn't coordinated now without buffs is when I just go in with itemate and start hacking at it. We'll just take a measurement of how long I did to kill it. It wasn't long, it was 10 seconds here when I could kill it. Now we take a break from this, and we see us again when I re-entered the instance to show you how it looks if you go. Okay, here we go again. Again, same boss. We'll try not to pull up little stunt here. Have everyone seen a difference? This been freaking 5 seconds while I was locked in animation for about 1 second through the flying in what did I change? If we can say Asmodeus damage was 2 it was 5 seconds. What did it majorly change when I go back to Asmodeus here? Sure, I didn't use thing it before, but it had only 3 stacks, and it was the best of my ability to do. So why did the damage I outputted increase that much? It basically increased that much because I used 2 skills to buff up my damage as a god. And this is something that needs to be taken account for you if you are bursting with a class, for example. Since the Revenant doesn't need the preparation time for a big burst, I can use God's Army, which reads as follows. You generate a God's Army effect for 12 seconds, which increases the damage and the movement speed by 50%. That means that God's Army just gives you a 50% damage increase for 12 seconds. The next thing I did was using God's Might. Well, God's Might itself just makes me take less damage and move faster. There is something in your hulls, I think it's called War. Ah, here it is, Blood Magic. When God's Might is active, the burning effect, when it did the jump thing, increases your deal damage by 20%. So in a total, I buffed up my damage by 70% with this combination. Which then in return means that you have a really, really good and solid damage boost. This you can use on bosses when you're alone, like me did, but you can also do it when you are in a team. Tell your team to wait until you call for buffs. The moment you jump in with the God's Might, you start calling, like jumping buffs in 1, 2, 3. When you have the 3 and takes a go on it, you are activating your Revenant ultimate, or whatever you have a skill at that moment that goes for a melee thing, and just smash down on your foes. This works well for Revenant because it doesn't have a setup time. For a Berserker, for example, if he uses the Iron Heart, it's not that easy because the Iron Heart will pretty much make you spend time depleting energy to burst. If you use the Green Terror symbol to make the smoke effect out of it, and while you're doing that, the most of your godly buffs will already be over before you can restart. Although it can increase your damage a bit, it's then more frequently than it's worth. But for the Revenant, for example, this works pretty well. And there are other classes where it also works pretty well to use. For example, God stuff on that account. To do this, you need to know that the ultimates are bound to classes. Like the supports class have the God's Army. The DD classes, the melee DD classes, have the God's Might. The ranged classes use the God's Fury, which is one of the shittiest things you can use, by the way. Its damage is like a poke. Doesn't do much, just looks fancy. But for example, the mage classes have this ability called where is it? Divine abilities. The thing called God's authority. God's authority, on the other hand, I think it's also war. Increase the damage of God's Spirit. More damage there. Is it on willpower? Knowledge. At some point, I don't know where it actually is here, but there is something. There's something but it increases your damage towards everyone that is affected by the god storm thing. Increase the power of its might, damage boost, willpower, blah blah blah. Where is it? Should be here somewhere. Increases support. That. Here? Somewhere it must be. Ah, here. Long-term searching increases the damage of targets affected by God's authority. Means this is a debuff that applies during the duration of God's authority. Which in that case means, for example, if you want to burst on a necromancer or to burst on kinetic, for example, you can go in a combination of using God's army, changing over to necro, throwing this thing, and then use your staff. Or if you are aware like the stuff works that we worked out, you will first put your pad out and then throw this stuff so that you don't get animation blocked like I did at the moment. With this in mind, you can increase the damage output you have as a god tremendously. And I really mean tremendously. And this is also the reason why it's important to understand how exactly does your divine abilities affect your bursting style. And to not suck at such stuff, it's important to take into account everything you learned from normal bursting, but also the new stuff from God bursting. On both parts, you need to combine it to the best of your knowledge. Like, we have learned that the pad needs time to come out and so on. So, if you first would throw, like I did now, the God's authority, this would mean before your pad is out and even shooting, it's over. But if you put it out and then throw it, your pad will probably only done one shot or something, not a measure of his damage, while the enemy target gets now hit by the damage of God's authority, of your pad, and everything buffed up. In that regard, you can significantly increase your damage. The reason why it, for example, is a bad idea as a Firestarter is, if you come back to Firestarter, you have to collect balls. You have nothing here. Nothing is ready. You have to run around and collect balls. Even if you just watch the timer of the cat thing, you are wasting like 3 seconds to even start bursting. That's the reason why you need to take into account what class you play. If you're just playing Firestarter, I would advise do not use the change from an alchemist or from a support class with the God's army, because it just wastes your time, and just try to use your God's army, not the God's army, the God's authority, before you actually hit something. Like, the maximum range here. I will just take one of those guys as a target. Come on. Yeah, target is one. You have a really big range like this one. Of course, you cannot do it with everything. What you could do, like zack, zack, throw, then go your normal rotation, and go, go, go. As long as this purple area is around, you will at least have 3 out of 5 fireballs be buffed up. This is something that can also increase your damage to the fire starter, but then again, it's not as efficient as if you just would um, um, put it on other classes if you try to amplify it with God's abilities. But the God abilities are important. So another thing I want to say about gods, particular gods that don't use melee classes. And the first starter is a good example of it. I constantly see people bursting as a fire starter like this. They put out everything they have to kill. But why doesn't it work like one would maybe expect? It doesn't work like that because of the factor that your weapons use ranged damage. And if nobody ever bothered how that works, it reads as follows. And all damage that you do is increased by 33% if there is more than 20 yards, it's 10 meters, not yards, but between you and the target. At smaller distances, the effect is weaker, up to 665% at less than 10 yards. Means, for example, if I take this guy, if I am now at a bigger distance than 20 meters, I am getting full power of my weapon. I mean, we had some Reapers like them before. If I now get full power of my weapon, and also the fact that the fireball itself has a growing aspect to it that makes it deal more damage the farther it travels, we have a tremendously power difference. Like, I go on the max distance now and just throw, let's say, one fireball. Has anyone seen the Reapers that previously took 3 fireballs? I'm not, because they just died on the first impact. So, what I want to say is a range DD. Make sure that you at least keep 20 meters distance if it is possible. If you would be dying somewhere or falling off, or if you would, for example, drag a boss with you because you already have boss aggression, it's fine. I understand that sometimes it can't work out as we optimally want. But if you have a solid tank that holds the boss where it is, and you are a ranged class, take your time to organize. I will take this as an example for the current invasion where it's about Pythonites P1. This is where the boss stands, where it's hold. And many people, when they are gods, bursting like here. As you can see, this is nowhere even close to the 20 meters. You have to take your distance at least this far to throw the fireballs with the max efficiency according to the weapon. If you now want the maximum efficiency according to the skill, like we can see it here, when I guess go on the 20 meter range and I throw it, which will do damage. you could see the fireball increased 2 times now because it moved on the 24 meters range. If I now take my time and go for what I would suggest as a guard, the about 30-meter range, and you can like 1, 2, 3, 4. Before it hit, it was 4. Means the damage of the fireball at 29 meters, works at 28 by the way too, increases 4 times steadily as it flies. Which in return means if your tank is doing its job and holding the aggro where it is, it means you will do a tremendously higher damage output if you take your time to get everything in order. In times where you have to move quickly, this of course can be difficult, but for optimal burst and not to suck as a bursting god, take your time to check, do I have the right distance? Are my supports in range? Because a support also has a range to his buffs. Means if you walk 50 meters away to have maximum fireball possible range for you, this would mean that your supports need to come with you, because they have effectively a 15-meter range. So, as an example, I take this boss now. Wait a second. Shut up and die peacefully. As an example now, we want, let's say, a 30-meter distance, just because, well, fireballs. So 30-meter distance is what we want. Our supports have 15-meter range, means they would be standing where this plate is. So you are still in range to receive every buff, and they, for example, have no need to go exactly where you are, but they need to be in this 15-meter facility around you to apply. Since many supports have stuff that they need to throw at the boss, it's also good if they have this 15-meter distance, because this allows them to be close enough to use all their skills on the boss, but also close enough to you to get you every buff you need. So, this pretty much concludes the idea of how to take according of a buffs and how to according on distance and whatnot. For a melee class, for example, it's not that difficult because you can just jump in the face of someone. But even a melee class can use God's Might before they burst to actually increase their damage. And there are furthermore ways that a god can increase the possible damage output it can do. For an example here, I won't go practical showing that now, but for example, you can use Nerian's improved hammer. If you throw it away, it creates an area where you can stand in that increases your damage dealt with class abilities by 15%. That's a great amount and helps you push through. The other thing is if you have a suitable class where your main damage is dealt passively, which only at the moment applies for the Necromancer, and you would be having this thing, would be Herida's Wings. Herida's Wings allow you and your teammates to have 100% crit chance, which in regard means that every shot of your pet as a Necromancer will hit critical. That's great. It actually gives you a great advantage on damage. And also if you are, for example, bursting with Multiple of God, everyone just crits. But this is specific stuff. Stuff that not everyone has, and stuff that maybe not even everyone wants to bolt into their bursting. The important stuff is the basics. take care that you understand, what do your divine abilities do? What can you do with it? When is it right to use them, when not? When is it the right distance when I'm far away from the boss or not? Take all that into account to make sure that you don't suck as a god. Have a nice day, guys.